Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. King Ahasuerus of Persia has demoted Vashti from being queen, so he has now started the look for a new queen. How would the new queen be chosen? Was that he had advisors scour the land for young, beautiful virgin women who would then come and spend a night in his bed. If he was pleased with them, then they would become queen. Otherwise, they would become part of his harem. Among it all, Esther, a Jewish young woman, was swept up. She came to the house of the women, and the one in charge was well pleased with her, so much so that he treated her better than all the other women. But would she please Ahasuerus? Let's find out. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to the book of Esther, to Esther chapter 2. We're going to be reading from verses 12 through 23. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Esther chapter 2, beginning at verse 12. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months' preparation according to the regulations for the women. And thus were the days of their preparation apportioned, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's eunuch, who kept the concubines. She would not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go in to the king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai, as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gates, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. In verse 12, we learn that before women came in to spend their night with the king, they had to spend a year purifying themselves. Why? Well, it all has to do with how the king viewed himself. The official title of the king of Persia at the time of Xerxes I was King of Kings of the Achaemenid Empire and Pharaoh of Egypt, meaning that the king of Persia viewed himself as a god. Therefore, to approach such a man, especially as pure as the Persian kings viewed themselves, one had to be exceptionally pure. How arrogant these kings thought of themselves, but if such was true, and it wasn't, the process would have been understandable. Under the law of Moses, back in Leviticus 16, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would have to purify himself before standing in the presence of God in the Holy of Holies. Now, the process was not as elaborate and time-consuming as this, but listen to the process back from Leviticus 16, verses 1 to 14. Now the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, when they offered profane fire before the Lord, and died. And the Lord told Moses, "Tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat, which is on the ark, lest he die. For I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. Thus Aaron shall come into the holy place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering, and of a ram as a burnt offering. He shall put the holy linen tunic and the linen trousers on his body. He shall be girded with a linen sash, and with the linen turban he shall be attired. These are holy garments. Therefore he shall wash his body in water and put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall take the 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord, and the other lot for the scapegoat. And Aaron shall bring the goat on which the Lord's lot fell, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord, to make atonement upon it, and to let it go as the scapegoat into the wilderness. And Aaron shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall kill the bull as the sin offering which is for himself. Then he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, with his hands full of sweet incense beaten fine, and bring it inside the veil. And he shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony, lest he die. He shall take some blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side, and before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. So as you can see, if one is to stand before God, one had to be purified. The thing is, Ahasuerus wasn't God. But thinking that he was, the women had to go through this process. 6 months of the year's purification involved purifying themselves with oil of myrrh, while the other 6 months was spent beautifying themselves with perfumes. Myrrh was highly esteemed by the ancients for its scent and purifying power, and was an ingredient of the anointing oil under the law of Moses, as we saw in Exodus 30, verse 23. The perfumes used were generally spices intended to enhance the smell of the woman so that she would be desirable to the king. And so, when she had completed this, and it was her turn to spend her night with the king, each woman got to have whatever she wanted to take with her for her night with the king, usually in the form of dress or ornaments. And so, once the night was over, if the king didn't choose her as queen, she became his concubine, but didn't return to the same house that she came from, but rather to the house of the concubines. In ancient times, most kings had 3 houses for women. One would be for the queen. We saw Solomon have this for the daughter of Pharaoh back in 1 Kings. The king would also have a house for virgins, women who were chosen to become concubines, and then a house for concubines. The 2 latter houses would be overseen by a servant, and in the case of Ahasuerus, each house was overseen by a eunuch, Hegai for the house of the virgins, and Shaashgaz for the house of the concubines. When it came to be Esther's turn, which happened in the 10th month known as Tebeth, corresponding to our late December, early January, and in the 7th month of Ahasuerus' reign, corresponding to 479 BC, after his defeat by the Greeks, Esther decided not to ask for anything when it was her turn, but did whatever Hegai advised. And so, when she came into the bedchamber of the king, the king fell for her, and he loved her more than all the other women. He thus made Esther queen in place of Vashti, and celebrated her crowning by throwing a great feast, the Feast of Esther, which was attended by the king's officials and servants. He also proclaimed a holiday in her name and gave gifts to the people according to his generosity. Now, even with Esther being chosen as queen, that didn't mean that the king still didn't seek more concubines, for verse 19 very clearly states that he did. It's just that Esther was made queen, which came with its own title and special privileges. In spite of these privileges, though, she did not tell him of her heritage, following Mordecai's command. What happened next, though, is what likely got Mordecai on the radar of Ahasuerus to begin with, for while at the king's gate, Mordecai got wind of an assassination plot being planned by 2 of the king's eunuchs. We don't know how Mordecai came by this information, but he did. He told Esther the news, who in turn told Ahasuerus. And after an inquiry was made and confirmed that the information was true, both eunuchs were hanged in the gallows for treason, something that was recorded in the Chronicles of the Kings of Persia and in the book of Esther here for us. Now, this hanging is not like we would consider hanging with a noose, but rather either crucifixion on a tree or impalement, as both of these methods of execution were done by the Persians. This conspiracy, though, wouldn't be the first found in this book, for in chapter 3, we're going to meet a man that will become infamous in this book and be the real threat to the Jews. So we invite you back for the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Esther chapter 3, verses 1 to 6, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.